This is a review for chapters 31, 32, 33, and 34. Chapter 31 is fungi, chapter 32 is animal diversity and the evolution of body plans, 33 is protostomes, and 34 is deuterostomes. So to start off with fungi, you're probably familiar with them. We know them as decomposers. You also may eat fungi, and we'll kind of go over different forms of fungi. There can be either single or multicellular fungi. So like the ones that you eat, like an actual mushroom, that would be multicellular, versus something like yeast, that would be single celled, which is also something else that you eat. They can be sexual or asexual. They have a unusual form of mitosis. They extract or absorb nutrients from the surroundings. And there is a term for that. It's something trophic. If I think of it, I will. Saprophytic. There we go. That there's saprophytic. That's what the fancy word for extracting and absorbing nutrients from surroundings. And then lastly, it says animal and fungi last shared a common ancestor 460 million years ago. Still some debate though. If we find more information, then that will change. For the phylogenetics, it's still something that is possibly changing, but for right now, this is what we have. And I also included a picture here on the right hand side of a mushroom. And so mushroom belongs to the phyla, this one right here, Basidiomycota. So Basidiomycota is the one that is probably more familiar to you. Some other mushrooms are called cup mushrooms, and they look similar. Actually, there's a picture here. So here on the far right, Ascomycota, this is like a cup fungus. Basidiomycota could be this one too, which is called a shelf fungus. And then there's a few that are kind of uncommon. Zygomycota is bread mold, actually. So you might be familiar with some, you just probably weren't familiar with the phyla names, but those are some of the more, I guess, common ones. As far as how they look structurally, they have, like, there's some words that I really need you to remember, like the hyphae or hypha and the septa. What's strange about them is there's not really much going on within each of the cells. So like these are all cells and they have a nucleus inside. And then that's kind of it. Around the nucleus you have cytoplasm. That's it. So they're actually pretty simple organisms. So let's see. So what does this say? That if they're multicellular, they can be long, and then they have these hyphae filaments. And yeah, there we go. Oh, this is good to note that they can have rapid growth under good conditions. So typically for a fungus, ideal for them would be like warm, moist conditions, and then you'll get a lot of rapid growth for that. Mycelia and cell walls. Mycelium, so like let's look at this picture here on the bottom. If you have like a cluster, we call that mycelium, but all that is separate little hyphae. So in this picture, you see it zoomed in. So there are individual hyphae, and then if you cluster them together, we call it mycelium. And that's the only difference between those two words. As far as their cell wall, it's similar to plants because they also have a cell wall, but it's different because this one is made out of chitin, which, and I like that it says it here in the slide. It's the same type of carb that you would find in arthropods exoskeleton. So arthropods are like insects, really crunchy exoskeleton. It'll be the same for mushrooms, that their cell wall is made of chitin. As far as reproduction, they reproduce using spores, which is something we have heard of before. We talked about this when we were talking about seedless plants like moss, how they have spores. Very similar. So fungi will also have spores, and this is how they're able to reproduce. It says here that most are dispersed by wind. As far as nutrition, they're able to get their food through secreting enzymes. And I'm trying to look for any words that I really want you to remember. But I think we've mentioned them already, that they are decomposers, saprophytic, This is good that they break down cellulose, and cellulose is what the cell wall of plants are made out of. So they're actually able to break that down. The ecology of fungi. So it says here that some are difficult, well, actually, many are difficult or impossible to culture in the lab. So it's difficult to assess the diversity of the species, but we can check them out with using their DNA. We had already mentioned this part, that they're able to break down cellulose and lignin from wood. And so once they are able to break that down, the nutrients from that process are then able to be used in the environment, that's why we call them decomposers. They're able to break down these molecules, or larger organisms like dead animals. They can break that down, and then their excretion or leftovers then can be absorbed by other things like bacteria. It's kind of like that. That's how nothing gets wasted in the environment. Interactions with other species, so they can be really good. Like right here, this last one, we call this a mutualistic relationship, where both parties benefit. The fungi benefits, as well as it could be like a host, and we'll kind of go over an example of that. So mutualistic is where both benefit. Commensalism is when one benefits and then the other one is not harmed, but not benefiting. It's just neutral. You can be parasitic, where it does harm the host, or a pathogen, where it harms the host by causing an actual disease. Lichens are not, they're not 100% of fungi, but we do cover them in this chapter. They have they're part fungi and part photosynthetic. The photosynthetic part is bacteria, which is called cyanobacteria, and we have gone over this before. Cyanobacteria is the first oxygen producer in the planet. That's how we got Earth's early oxygen, through this bacteria. So a lichen is both a fungi and cyanobacteria or algae put together. And so I have some pictures at the bottom for you. You've seen these. We have these on the trees. They're very slow growing, but they're actually really pretty to look at. So next time you're outside, go ahead and look at a tree and you'll probably find a lichen. They're really important. They can break down rock, which is cool. They can break down rock, they can break down soil. So if there's ever a tragedy where even the soil is taken out, like a tsunami could wipe out trees and even the soil, so all that would be left is rock. So then how would you get soil there again? Lichens are able to break down rocks, and then you can have soil come from that. Mycorrhiza is a type of fungi that has a mutualistic relationship with plants. So on the root of the plant, you will find this fungus. And so what it does is it breaks down anything that is nearby, and whatever is broken down is then able to be absorbed by the plant. So plants that have mycorrhiza typically are way more nutritious, and they promote plant growth. So this is a benefit to both. The plant will also supply the fungus with sugars from photosynthesis. So both of these partners benefit. So this is a mutualistic relationship. The example on this slide, athlete's foot, is a very popular. I wouldn't say it's a disease. It's not a disease. It's just like a fungus. So athlete's foot is, like, you may have seen it on people's toenails. Another example there is ringworm or nail fungus. I mix those up. So nail fungus is different from athlete's foot. Athlete's foot, I believe, is just kind of like, just starts eating away at your skin. Ugh. I mean, I haven't personally had that, but I think that's what that is. And so these things, typically you can get them in like gym showers, or just sharing a public restroom and you have your skin exposed. So that's how you can get those. So this would be parasitic, right? Where you have the fungus on the human or animal, and it's benefiting off of it, and the host is being hurt. So this will not kill you, so it's not a pathogen, but this is definitely a parasitic relationship. And then they also mention that they can hurt plants too. That is a common thing in agriculture, where you will have a crop that is really hurt by a fungus, and they try to eradicate that. We spoke on yeast at the introduction, and so this is a really common fungus that is used for food production for, and I think they have examples here. Yeah, bread, beer, wine. We use yeast a lot in our cooking. It is, let's see, it's single celled, and we did say that earlier, and most reproduce asexually. We're going to transition now to the animals. Animals are heterotrophs, meaning that they cannot make their own food. They do have to get their food by either foraging or hunting, but they themselves cannot make their own food, and that's why we label them as heterotrophs. So these are characteristics of animals. So animals are heterotrophic, they are multicellular, they have no cell walls, and they have active movement. So it says move more rapidly and in more complex ways. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are like moving around. Like some animals cannot move at all. And we'll kind of go over some of those animals. Diversity of form vary greatly in form, ranging in size from organisms too small to see, with unaided eye to enormous. For animal evolution, these are the 5 key innovations: symmetry, tissues, body cavity, patterns of development, and segmentation, and we'll go over these. The types of symmetry are going to be either bilateral or radial. For humans, we have bilateral. That means if they were to cut the human body from the head all the way down, that it would be almost identical on both sides of your body. So here you can see, like on the turtle, from the tip of his head to his tail. So that would be that he is expressing bilateral symmetry. Radial is like if you were to cut it into a pizza or a pie and it's just equal on all sides. This example looks like, I think this is a jellyfish. So that's the difference between those types of symmetry. There is some animals that don't have any, like the sponge. So if they don't have symmetry, we call them asymmetrical, that they do not have symmetry. Animals that are bilateral, we put them in either a protostome group or a deuterostome. For deuterostomes, this means that when the animal is being formed, the anus develops first, and for protostomes, the mouth develops first. Someone had told me, I think, how to remember it, like deuterostomes, like doo-doo, like poop. So their anus develops first. So if that helps you, that's great. Here are some distinguishing factors between the two of them, and I'll show you in a picture these, like the protostomes, that they have spiral cleavage versus deuterostomes that have radial cleavage. So let's kind of show you what that means. So you can see this one is protostomes, and down here is the deuterostomes. They look very similar, but there are a few differences. But here we have this spiral cleavage, radial cleavage, and then they form similarly, but and this word is strange. You would think it's pronounced like co, but it's actually pronounced coelom, the coelom. I know that one is pronounced very weird. So the coelom, for the deuterostomes, we have our anus over here developing first versus the protostomes where the mouth develops first. We have a lot of animals on our planet, and we put them into phylums, and we're going to go over some of the main ones. There are more, but we're going to go over some of the main ones. For example, we have the arthropods, mollusks, chordates, platyhelminths. Arthropods are, and they have all the examples here. Look how many there are, how many species. 1 million or over 1 million of these. This is anywhere between shrimp, crabs, beetles, insects. So like if you eat shrimp or lobster, I mean, it's in the same phylum as if you were to eat a cockroach. So they're not very different, to be honest. They have that chitin exoskeleton that we talked about. Mollusks could be anything from snails, oysters, clams, octopus, or slugs. So these can be either terrestrial or aquatic. Same thing for the arthropods. Now chordates is Probably the one that we are most familiar with, because look, this is mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians. Platyhelminths are our flat worms. Platy, I don't know how I remember, but every time I see platy, I associate that with flat. So platyhelminths are flatworms. Nematodes are roundworms. Annelids are segmented worms like our earthworms. Porifera are sponges. Echinodermata are our sea stars. Cnidaria will be jellyfish. And coral reefs, probably one of the most important animals. And that one actually, people are not really familiar with that, but coral reefs are actually animals. And then we have these sea mats, sea moss. And some of these are a little bit more unfamiliar to us, but just know that we do have all these different phylums and all these different animals. For deuterostomes, they are the chordates and the echinoderms. So, and on the slides, I think I have them labeled which ones are which, and we'll make sure to reiterate that. For our sponges, we already said that they are asymmetrical. Look how pretty they are, all these colors. They can't move, so that's something unique about them. They can't move. Neither can coral reefs, but they are able to like move, but they can't like walk around, if that makes somewhat any sense. But they are multicellular. They have these vase-shaped bodies. So, but they are an animal. A lot of people are not sure or not familiar with sponges that they are animals. The phylum Cnidaria. Let me establish this. Sponges, they are not a protostome or a deuterostome. Cnidaria as well, they're not a protostome or a deuterostome. And then our first one will be the flatworms, and I have them labeled. But let me go back to my Cnidaria. Cnidaria is going to be your jellyfish and the coral reefs like we had mentioned earlier. And you maybe you've seen these if you've ever gone to the island. They're really cool looking. I think jellyfish are really cool. Also, what's unique about them is they don't have a lot of the features that most animals have. Like, look, they have no reproductive system, no circulatory, excretory. They don't have a digestive system. They're just this floating thing. And somehow they exist, and they've existed for millions of years. We're not really actually sure how long they've been on this planet. So, but they are animals, very unique. Our flatworms are our platyhelminths. They are protostomes, meaning that the mouth develops first. You can find these in freshwater, I guess even marine and moist terrestrial. So a lot of them are parasitic, like hookworms, I think is what they were saying. But yeah, they a good example would be planaria. If you were to go into a canal and get some fresh water, you would be able to find planaria, and that's a really good example of platyhelminths. Phylum Mollusca is also a protostome, meaning that the mouth developed first. These are probably one of the coolest phylums. They're invertebrates, meaning they don't have like a skeleton. They have no backbone or anything, but they are the smartest invertebrates. They have large, well, actually, I take that back. The octopus is the smartest invertebrate. These other ones are not as intelligent, but the octopus is extremely intelligent. They can problem solve. Like this guy is opening up a bottle. They've been like filmed that they like leave the tank, and I don't know what they do, but then they're able to come back to the tank and close it so that they don't get caught. Like they're very, very smart, and they're able to camouflage. They're just amazing animals. Super cool. They have some unique anatomy too. Like I know the octopus has what you would call a beak. They also have this. The squid is also in this phylum, and they have, I think it's called the ink pen. Very interesting phylum. Annelids are going to be your earthworms, or that's an example of an annelid. These are also protostomes, so the mouth develops first. They have these segments, and then inside, like you would think that this is the head, right? Because of the way that it's shaped, but actually this part is the head. This is the clitellum, the reproductive part. But they have multiple hearts. I think it's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There you go. They have 5 hearts. They have a nerve core, their intestine. They're very cool animals, and they're really important for the environment. So if you ever see an earthworm, that means you have a really healthy soil. Arthropods, we mentioned, is probably the biggest phylum. There's lots of species. This could be anything from flies, bees, anything like that. They have the chitin exoskeleton. They're segmented. So this animal has three segments, right? The head, the thorax, and the abdomen. So there are three segments. They also have wings. That's probably one of the reasons that this phylum is really successful, because they have these wings. Not all of them do, but quite a few have wings, and so that's really helped them out. That's why they're really good pollinators, and so plants and insects co-evolved with each other because of that. So really cool. Molting too. Molting means that they can shed their exoskeleton. So something unique about them is that if you were to puncture their exoskeleton, it can't heal. These cells are considered to be I think it's acellular is what they call it. They can't, like, if you were to get a cut, how you can get a scab and grow your skin back, they can't. So they would just die out. Very unfortunate. Their respiratory system is unique. They don't have lungs, but they have what we call a tracheal system, which is this network. That's labeled spiracles. They're like little holes. So he has holes on the side of the body. And so if you've ever sprayed Raid or any insect killer, what Raid will do is that it'll just kind of plug up these holes, and then the animal just suffocates. But yeah, that's how they breathe. They don't have lungs. They have a tracheal system and spiracles, which are the holes. We have our first Deuterostome, which means that the anus develops first. So this is a sea star or a starfish. This is a sea urchin. I think, what other examples they have there? Oh, sand dollars, sea cucumbers. They're really unique animals if you've ever seen the way that they eat. They're very unique. He has a very unique type of symmetry, pentaradial. Radial, we said, those like if you were to cut it like a pizza or a pie, that it would be the same on each side. Our other deuterostomes, so there's only two phylums that are deuterostomes, the chordates and the echinodermata. Chordates are what we had mentioned earlier: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. And I included this picture on the right because this is how they look when they're embryos. All of them. So fish look like this, amphibians, reptiles, they all look like this. And this is how we know that we're very closely related to each other. We call them chordates, and I'm not sure if it says it here. Let's see. The endoskeleton is different. Well, I can't find it, but chordates, we associate that with them having a vertebrae, which is a backbone, or a notochord. There we go. The notochord. So some animals actually keep the notochord, or other animals, this will develop into having a vertebrae, which is a backbone. Let's give you some examples. I have is this an alligator or a crocodile? Looks like, I think this is a crocodile. If they have a narrow snout, it's a crocodile. If they have a wide snout, it's a alligator. But what's really unique about this one specifically, not all reptiles are the same, but this one, they have a 4-chambered heart, whereas other reptiles have a 3-chambered heart. They actually will nurse their young, like not nurse by like giving them milk, but they like take care. So nurture, we'll say nurture. They nurture their young. Other reptiles won't. So that's very unique about this guy. And there you go. We have the vertebrae. Really cool animal. So cool. We've got a fish. Sorry about these. There we go. I've got a fish, and they vary. There's so many species of fish, and there's different kinds as far as like categories. But some of the main things that they have is they have a swim bladder, which is able to keep them really buoyant. They don't have lungs, where like the crocodile, he does actually have lungs. Fish don't. Fish have gills. Keeping on with the fish, so some have what we call ray finned, like that, where it's just kind of attached to the body, or they have lobed fin, where it kind of looks like it's kind of extended, almost like a foot. And so amphibians are thought, or actually not thought, but they're known to have descended from these. So amphibians, which are your frogs, all of that, they descended from lobed finned fish, and you can kind of see that it looks like a foot. And so here's a really good example here on the right. They have Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik is a transitional fossil, and so he did not have back legs, but he had really strong front legs, and so he was able to perch himself up out of the water. And so this is kind of how we knew the transition from ocean to land. He was the proof that yes, amphibians did come or descended from the ocean as far as like ancestry goes. So birds and reptiles are very similar. Like if you were to look at a bird, they look just like a reptile. The only exception is that they have like feathers. Everything else is pretty much almost identical. Well, I guess the beak. The beak is also different, but it is similar. Both do have amniotic eggs, and so amniotic eggs is the reason that reptiles, opposed to frogs, which are amphibians. So the difference between, or there's many, but some of the differences between reptiles and amphibians is that reptiles can lay their eggs on land, and amphibians can't. Amphibians like frogs or mud puppies. I'm trying to think of other common amphibians, but they can't. They have eggs that are very similar to fish eggs. Like if you were to see them both, they look almost identical. And they have to be in water because they will dry out. So amphibians are dependent on water, whereas reptiles are not. Other features about amphibians versus like reptiles is amphibians, they do have, when they're developing, they will have gills, and then they will eventually get lungs, but they still they have a subcutaneous layer is what it's called, and so they're able to breathe through their skin. They still rely on the water. You cannot take a frog away from water, he will dry out, whereas reptiles, they can be away from the water. Also with the birds, they have scales on the legs, and I think we have talked about this before in class. So you can see they still have scales. Both of them have the amniotic eggs. Birds have feathers, which are modified scales. It's really, really cool. They have other things too, is they have hollow bones. Birds also have a really fast metabolism so that they're able to stay light and so that they can be light enough to fly. So those are some really unique features. This is another transitional fossil, Archaeopteryx. He is kind of like that we knew that birds came from reptiles, is how I'll put it. So this is another transitional fossil, and he had feathers, and this is kind of how we knew that the birds came from the reptiles. Some mammal adaptations would be our teeth, that they have specialized teeth to eat different things. Digestion of plants as well. Mammals have a mutualistic partnership with bacteria. So like in your mouth, you have your salivary glands excrete enzymes to digest certain things. The third one says development of hooves or horns. This is for mammals. Hooves are specialized keratin pads. Horns are bone surrounded by keratin. Antlers are made of bone, not keratin. Very interesting. The antlers are made of bone and then they just fall off. Here's some unique animals, and we're almost done here. So this guy is our platypus. We call him a monotreme. He's super unique because, well, I mean, just look at him. But he has like webbed feet. He's also venomous, and I don't think that's here on the slide. He has like talons on his back hind feet that are venomous. If he were to puncture you, he does have venom. But they lay eggs, but they are warm-blooded, how we call it. So he's kind of just a really unique thing. So if you ever see this word monotreme, that is the platypus. Lays eggs. He has a cloaca. So what a cloaca is that they have just one hole versus like humans have two holes. One hole is for pee, one hole is for poop. Or for females, one is for pee and for having a baby and then poop. They have just one hole. Birds have a cloaca, amphibians have a cloaca. So this just means it's the same hole for everything. So he has one hole. He lacks well-developed nipples, I guess, for nursing. And there's only 3 living species, the duck-billed platypus and 2 echidna species. Very unique. Marsupials are animals that can have a pouch in the front. And so the only one in North America is our possum. Look how cute he is. So in North America, the only marsupial is the possum. In Australia, they have the kangaroo, and then there's the smaller one, the wallaby, I think. Wallaby is also a marsupial. Very cool. So with well, like why they have a pouch is because they have their babies um, premature. So she will have her baby, and her baby will just come out hairless and just looking just awful. And then she will put him in her pouch, and inside of her pouch she has her mammary gland, so that's where the milk is. So inside of the pouch is where the milk is, and he is just, or she is just nursing and nursing until they get really cute. Fun fact, a little baby kangaroo, we call them a joey. Joey, really cute. All right, some placental animals means that they have the baby fully developed, I guess, inside of the placenta, just like humans. Humans would fall into this category. And so what they say here is that they nourish the baby through, or in the embryo all the way through. They, let's see, forms from the both fetal and maternal tissues. I mean, I think that's really it, but you know what placental animals are. There's a dolphin. There is a lion. This is our last slide, the evolution of primates. So some distinguishing features of primates is that they have the grasping fingers or the toes, and that they have binocular vision, that eyes are shifted towards the front of the face opposed to being on the side, like kind of like fish, how fish have them on the side. And it lets the brain judge distances precisely. And that's it. So thank you guys for watching. Feel free to, I guess, watch it again if you need to, and then go ahead and take your test. Good luck, guys.